Declining enrollment trends in the city schools is the main reason for opening up these new Rochester City School District pre-Ks. Students who attend such pre-Ks are twice as likely to remain in the district for kindergarten rather than to go into charter schools. Having pre-K centers in each zone would allow students to enroll in a pre-K center that is in the zone in which they live, which would match the requirements of the updated managed school choice policy. In both Buffalo and Syracuse, more students attend city-run pre-Ks than CBO pre-Ks, community-based organization pre-Ks. In Rochester, we have the opposite case, and we'd like to change that so that more students attend Rochester City School District pre-Ks. The relative cost of attending Rochester City School District pre-Ks versus CBO pre-Ks was discussed. Extended day enrichment programs would provide flexible pickup time for parents. The reason for the rush in making these decisions is that there's a New York State deadline on March 1st for any board-approved school changes, so the board has to vote on the 27th.
To that individual, and I say that because even when I was a parent who didn't have a car, who was poor, I knew about ECDI and Robin's work in this field, and so even back then, lots of respect for the entire work that ECDI has done to advocate for child care dollars for individuals who are working. And a lot of people may not know this, but years ago, I had a program with Jim Coffey called Nurturing Communities, who worked specifically with first-time mothers on social services. And we did provide a child care center right downtown at MCC. We got kicked out for the police department. However, the goal of that program was to provide opportunities for mothers who were on social services to get education around early childhood education, obtain a college degree, finish their high school diploma through MCC, because back then you could do that, and then also provide childcare on site. So for us, that was a truly encompassed wraparound. We allowed them to do their work on. So these conversations are things that I have personally been involved in and have some understanding of. And I've mentioned this in the media about the WEP piece when we talk about the wraparound care. So my concern is that there are families who have more than just a child, even myself as a mother with 3 girls, that have more than one child. That's not just UPK. So if I needed child care for my 10-year-old and my 11-year-old and I have a 3-year-old, our UPK centers are not going to be equipped to provide those wraparound cares for my whole family. So I'm struggling with this. I've already asked the superintendent to separate it completely from February 27th. I want to talk about the trends as well, because there was someone here that's mentioned that they were a Greece resident, and I was surprised by that. So I'll start with, how can a Greece resident be enrolled in the Rochester City School District UPK program? That's a question I do want to answer.
One way that can happen is if you have parents who have shared custody and one parent lives in Greece and one lives in the city. If they have legal paperwork that shows that they both have custody and one parent resides in the city, then the child is able to come to the UPK program. Another way that could happen is if like a custodial grandparent had educational guardianship and they lived in the city, even though the parent might live someplace else, as long as they were the educational, guardian and the child resided with them, then they would be eligible to come. So there are a few situations like that where somebody could, but if the child lives with their parents, and they both live not in the city, then the child would not be eligible to attend the pre-K program.
Thank you. So, because when that was mentioned, one of the things that I had, one of the issues I am struggling with is this data that if they select a UPK in-house versus out-house, that they're more likely to pick a charter. And I just don't know where that statistic came from. And I have to say, I've never heard that statistic. And, you know, I've been penalized by this community for talking to the other side. I do talk with charter folks. I want to understand what the education experience is like for all children in the city of Rochester. And that has never come up in any side of the conversation. So I was very surprised. I've also asked to see where that data came from and how we are tracking that data, because I didn't even realize that that was data this district has ever tracked before. The other piece is when we talked about the alignment to update the managed choice policy. I absolutely hate our managed choice policy. I don't think anybody does not know that about me at this point. And one of the pieces when we talk about these 3 zones in the managed choice, when the entire city of Rochester operates on a 4-zone operation, it drives me insane that we still as a district operate with this south zone, and that means the southwest and the southeast, and they're fundamentally 2 entirely different neighborhoods and makeup of families. And I can tell you the Southwest is a food desert at minimum. At best, we have very few opportunities and supports, and I get that 44 is over there, but if I live in the Southeast, I don't know if I necessarily want to travel all the way to the Southwest. So these are the things that, when we're talking about our managed choice policy, we need to change. Again, I'm not sold on that. The statistic of having a pre-K center, I feel like this is a facade of options for families, and I just have to say that. I'm going to go through all my points and then I'm going to shut up. So, the other piece, these numbers with the 394, the 90, and the 130, of course, I love to do mathematics, so that's 614 seats. So I don't understand how Terry Day's presentation initially said 500, and why these numbers are now being changed. I want to look at the data for Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. Someone mentioned here today, I think it was Ms. Bridget Shumway, who mentioned that Buffalo doesn't even have EPK for 3-year-olds. So now I'm feeling like we're not even comparing apples to apples here. So I would like information on how Buffalo and Syracuse not are just operating by percentages, but what their student population and makeup looks like, and as well as the transportation of affordability and access. Will it cost us more money to serve? The 2.24 million, is that in-kind donations, or is that actual funding that the district is paying for? Is that coming out of general funds? Is it grant funding? Is it grant funding we've already been getting that's part of the whole entire vision for EPK, UPK that the state has had already? So I'm not going to throw that in there. I'm very upset about saying that extended day enrichment program, primarily because we just cut ELT. And we cut ELT for K through 6 and high school, 7 through 12, and middle school. And then here we are saying we're going to bring ELT back essentially. And can we have ELT providers who are not teachers and not certified around EPK, UPK children? And I'm not convinced that we can. I don't know if it's legal or not. These are some of the things I'm going to throw them out there that I would be looking for answers. And in addition to that, I am going to again say this, that this is not a proposal that will save this district money. I think it's going to cost us a ton of money up front at the very minimum to convert 44. And let me just say, finally, I appreciate that you posted the timeline, but it's 5 weeks to consider undoing 20 years of collaboration. And I would just urge my colleagues to understand that the timeline. And when I met with the superintendent, I specifically did ask him about that March 1st deadline. And yeah, for school closings, we have the March 1st deadline from the state. But I could not find anywhere where it said a UPK center had to be decided by March 1st based on the state. So, and it's not a school. I don't think it's considered a school. I think it's a UPK center. So I would need to understand that better. But I'm going to urge my colleagues to also hold off on voting on this on February 27th to allow for more time and not to take a 5-week rush process for 20 years of collaboration. And I'm almost saying the opposite of what I said in December, based on the fact that the deficit, for one, I've been arguing with some of my colleagues about the deficit for at least a year, but legally, when it came out with through the external auditor, that was in August. We were having conversations in August, September, October, November. The plan was voted on to move forward, and in December, the resolutions for the reduction in force. So that was at least a minimum of a 4-month process for this board to have conversations about the plan before the plan was even voted on. And this is 5 weeks. And I'm going to be voting no if it's not moved forward to have longer, lengthier conversations about it. But that's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to shut up at this point.
It says here that 130 were unfilled, and I think that you mentioned, Anne Marie, that this was for in-house and for the CBOs, and so I wanted to know what the total number was for each of those, and then why we received 90 seats if we still had unfilled seats.
So I'm going to ask if Robin can speak to the details on that.
The 90 seats were in the new grant that I submitted in September, and we received it in December, and those were for 3-year-olds. So we still had, have had a strong demand for 3-year-olds, and we had about 100 3-year-olds on the wait list last year that we weren't able to place. So based on that demand, that's why I requested the number of seats. The unfilled seats that we've seen have been mainly 4-year-old seats. We are seeing a decline in our 4-year-old population, and it kind of mirrors a decline in the birth rate. We do expect next year to see a further decline in 4-year-olds based on the birth rate. There's a decline from the previous year of 150 to 200 students approximately in the 4-year-old birth rate. So we don't anticipate seeing numbers of 4-year-olds going up, and we're going to have to work even harder to recruit 4-year-olds. The state won't let us interchange 3-year-old and 4-year-old seats. Once you're awarded those seats, they're either awarded as 3-year-old seats like the new ones, or previously awarded as 4-year-old seats. You can't switch them. So that's why you see that unfilled. That's mainly the 4-year-olds. And the ones that we applied were for 3-year-olds. The unfilled seats were in CBOs and in schools, and as I said, they were mainly 4-year-old seats. Off the top of my head, I couldn't give you the breakdown. I'd have to go back and look at it because I don't like to give inaccurate information.
Yes, I would like those numbers when we get them. And I am on page 5 of the presentation. Here, I believe I wrote down that you said, Anne Marie, you said over 200 seats were being considered from the CPO. Did I get that correct in your presentation?
Over 200 seats. Actually, what I said was that we serve a little over 200 students in each of the centers, the proposed centers.
And then my last question has to do with page 4. So I wanted to break down or get more information on the evaluations that you're going to use to decide which CBOs you're going to be pulling from. And then just in regards to these statistics, I wanted to know, just for the third point, are we saying that every RCSD student shows statistically significant growth in every category? And if not, I would like to know what's the total number of students and percentage of that.
So it wasn't. I can't answer the number of students. It was actually just looking at the different categories. Robin has probably that detail ingrained in her head, so I'm going to let her provide some info.
The child observation record is our student assessment, and we do see that the children that attend the elementary school programs or the center program in the district do make for more growth than our children in the CBOs, statistically significant. However, they both end up at the same place at the end of the year. Our students in CBOs enter slightly higher, but the growth is more for the students in the elementary the growth is significant for both students in our CBOs and students in our schools and our district programs. We couldn't have the level of high-quality programming we have if we weren't doing well in both areas. Even mathematically, it wouldn't work out, you know. So we are seeing strong growth in both, but we are seeing students enter slightly lower in the school programs and grow more, which hits the level of statistical significance, but they do end up at the same place. So there is a lot of very high quality in both the program evaluations and the student assessments for both, as I said, because you couldn't have a high quality program and have one part of it, you know, not doing well. It wouldn't allow it to be that way.
Yes, I would like to look at that data, and then I also would like to know the evaluation process that you're going to use to decide seats through this plan.
That's it, Commissioner Shaw. All right, Commissioner Relied.
Okay, I have a number of questions, so bear with me. One of the concerns that was brought to my attention is the potential for adding costs. Like, who are the teachers who are teaching in these centers? And won't we incur more costs by bringing in the 500 or so students? Because are these contracted positions through our union? And the benefits, et cetera, that we're paying out for those types of positions, I mean, I can't imagine that that's going to be less expensive than what we're paying to CBOs. Isn't there a cost savings for the district by using CBOs?
So, you know, I don't think that this proposal was because of a cost savings. This is really to address the declining enrollment. And certified teachers are required at CBOs and at RCSD schools. So we would be hiring certified teachers. We already have certified teachers that teach our pre-K students. And we would be hiring more certified teachers, early childhood certification teachers for our pre-Ks.
So they're still under RT's contract?
That's correct.
But are the benefits that we're giving our teachers, that's a huge cost to the district.
Well, yeah, they will be our teachers. Yes, that's correct.
So I can't see how that's going to be a cost savings.
But it wasn't, I guess it wasn't proposed as a cost savings. I think that's what I, it's cost. Right. The cost savings is in closing the two schools because those students that are being served in 44 and 57 actually can fit in existing schools across the district. So that space would then be reutilized for our pre-K students.
Is there a way that we can like break down just all those numbers? Because I need to see it visually. And can you just give me a little history? Just because I'm only a high school teacher, so the early childhood stuff is a little new for me. How is EPK funded compared to some of our other programs?
I can explain that. I turned my mic off, sorry.
Grant funded?
Yes, it's all grants, and when I started as the executive director of the early childhood department about 11 years ago, we only had one grant, and it was a UPK grant, and we'd gotten it in 1998, and it was $10.8 million. When you get these grants from the state, they never increase. It's still $10.8 million, like it was 20 years ago or more. The only way that we've been able to get additional funding is when new grant opportunities open up. And Governor Como, when he came on board as our governor, started making pre-K grant opportunities available, you know, right away. I'm trying to think back, I hope I get the right year, but it might have been 14, 15 that the first opportunity came about, and we used that to move our programs from half day to full day. And that was a large sum of money. I think it was around 10 or 12 million. Then another grant opportunity came up for 3-year-olds. So we applied for that, and we got another, it's either 10 or 12 million. And since then, every time an opportunity has come up, just about every grant, I've applied for it, and we have gotten everyone we've applied for. So now we are up to, with the new grant, almost about 35 million. So we grew from 10.8 back in, I don't know, 08, 09 when I started to 35 now, and now we serve basically about almost 2,000 4-year-olds and about, I would say, I've got to remember the new grant, about, I would say almost maybe 1,500 3-year-olds with the extra 100 seats that we just got.
Does that include the CBO?
Yeah, that's schools and CBOs. In the pre-K regulations, you are required to show how you're going to collaborate with CBOs for a minimum of 10%. Now, we've always exceeded that, well over 10%. And then we're responsible, and it's my job to make sure that all of our programs, whether they be in schools or CBOs, are of high quality. So that has been my focus, and that's why I say you aren't going to see huge discrepancies between quality, because we work very hard to make sure they're all high quality.
Forgive me for all the questions here.
It's okay.
I received 75 emails from
Commissioner,
concerned.
that's why we're here, so this is the opportunity to ask those questions, so feel free.
One of the concerns that's been brought to my attention by a number of parents is, why didn't we consider, instead of, I understand the need to close schools, I understand the declining enrollments. I think for a lot of our families, there's a concern about transitions to kindergarten and then on to first grade. A lot of our families have kids that are very close in age to one another, maybe 2 years apart, or even closer in age. So can you maybe just give me the rationale behind why we are not considering maybe like a pre-K through K model in a school, or a pre-K through 1 model in a school, so that we can still include more kids from the same family?
So that's a great question, Commissioner, and it would entail us operating, so kindergarten program, kindergarten 1-2 program is a very different program than a pre-K. The length of the day is different, the services you have to provide are different, and for us to be able to, and so we would have to operate that model very differently. Like all of the other schools that have pre-K now, that are pre-K 2 or pre-K 6, we'd have to switch to that model. This is a more effective way and cost-effective way for us to operate a program that's center-based in one particular location that serves only one age range of students. So we generate the savings, the $4.1 million savings, in eliminating that K2 and K6 programming, and then we go to just pre-K, which operates very differently and efficiently with less other options and related services that we have to do in other programming. So we don't have the mandated push-outs for the music or the arts, the gym, the other requirements that we have to service when we operate a kindergarten through 12th grade program. We don't have it with pre-K.
Do you think you can fill these seats? Honestly, it seems like a large number of seats to fill. We're talking about 200 in one place, 200 in the other. How are you going to fill those seats?
Well, that's what part of my job. It had always bothered me that we never maximized our grant. When I was running a pre-K center here in the district at School 33 for about 6 years, I was on the recruitment committee. And I always had a lot of ideas of what we should be doing, but I wasn't in the position to make those decisions. So when I got in the position to make those decisions, we still had half-day programs, and we came very close to meeting our target that first year. And then in the mid-year, they let us have an expansion where we could try again mid-year, and we did hit our target, and it was the first time we ever hit it. After that, I made it my goal to make sure we hit that target every year, and we have maximized our grant every year since then. That is done through a lot of things. A huge recruitment advertising campaign and strategies that are targeted at the families, our demographics of people who have young children who live in the city, and those are selected very carefully. I've worked with the communications department for years. We create our own commercials that feature our own students in them. Every year it's a new commercial, and we feature students from CBOs and from schools in our programs so parents get to see them. We have a program booklet that outlines programs in schools and CBOs, a website, We have actually paid recruiters, paraprofessionals that work in our program that are part of our recruitment team in the summer that go door to door. So, I mean, we have a lot of strategies to do that. And then I'm always looking at things like the birth rates and how many people are moving out of Rochester versus moving in. Are we having changes with our refugee families? So this is something that has been a real focus for me during my tenure here, and it would continue to be. And there are just a variety of things we do with our communications department and with outreach. I go out sometimes to different events in the summer and meet families and say hello so they know my face and name. And it's kind of those grassroots efforts, but I will tell you, the very best advertisement we ever have had and will ever have is word of mouth from our families and the testimony that families give about their experiences in the program, and that's how we always fill the seats.
I just wanted to add, I hear Terry's voice in my head right now because I've heard him say so many times, I'm very competitive and I will ensure that these seats are filled. And so I know he will be working beside Robin to make sure that, you know, we do fill these seats and that this program continues to be successful.
Some assumptions that may not be the case.
All right, you know, I have 4 children and we went through the Pre-K program, but it was the half-day program. I know as a working mom, transportation was always an issue for us with 4 kids in the half-day program. And fortunately, we were able to figure that out from year to year. I know that for me personally, it would have been great to have a full-day program. Childcare costs, I mean, for 4 kids. Childcare costs are, I mean, they can bankrupt a family. And so wraparound care, you know, was never an option for those half-day programs. We loved the Pre-K program. It was great. I'm wondering though, for the programs that are full-day, the EPK programs, some kids are getting transported to the CBOs. Can you explain more about the transportation? Who pays for that? And can we do more to help families with transportation costs? Because it's a huge issue for a lot of working families.
That has been a topic I've been working on for years. There are a lot of challenges related to that. Recently, the Office of Child and Family Services changed their regulations for child care agencies around transportation. Now, the vehicles that they use have to be up to Department of Transportation regulations. So some of our CBOs that used to transport children in vans that weren't DOT level have had to stop their transportation. We do still have agencies that transport, but it's not a lot of them. And it's partly also because of the cost of the liability insurance. The liability insurance for transporting 3- and 4-year-olds is extremely expensive because it is a liability, because they all have to be in car seats, and if you did have an accident, you've got to be able to get all of those children quickly out of all those car seats and off that vehicle. So you have to have a monitor. So it is a very expensive transportation. For school districts, it's not reimbursable like school-age transportation is. So not only does it cost more, but you can't get reimbursed for it either. At one point, we were trying to look at, years ago, trying to give CBOs more money to try to transport kids, and they went to some of the local transportation companies here, and what I found out from that, because they were charging them such high exorbitant prices they couldn't afford them, I found out that the reason they did that was because they didn't have the capacity. They had all these agents coming to them saying, I want to contract with you, I want to contract with you, but they did not have the capacity to contract with all the agencies, so they raised the price so high that they knew some of them wouldn't be able to do it. So that's how I found out they didn't have the capacity. The only bus company that currently has the capacity is the RTS bus company, and that's why we've been doing the RTS bus passes. I realize that doesn't meet every family's needs, but transportation has just become a very tricky thing. Years ago, I traveled to Buffalo to find out how they managed to transport their students. And what I learned, I spent the day in Buffalo with the current director of operations back then, it was Jim Fenton. The Buffalo City School District is a very small geographic area, much smaller than Rochester, the part that's actually considered the city. So they don't have to transport anybody very far. The other thing that Buffalo did, and they had an opportunity to get this big transportation grant to do this innovative stuff in their transportation. So they got a lot of money, and they bought buses that had built-in car seats. And then they created a board that had lights on it that shows every bus. I mean, they did some really fantastic things, but they had a huge grant to do it with, and they continued to benefit years and years and years later from having set up this system. So that's how they managed that. Because I was also very curious, how did they manage to do this, and why couldn't we do it if they could do it? So that's what I learned about that. And those are some of the challenges that we face in trying to provide transportation to preschoolers.
And how are we going to determine who's attending these centers? Is it only based on the zone that you live in? What if, I work in the Northeast zone and that's where I'd like to have my kid go because it's close to my workplace and I can drop them off there? Is that going to be an option for?
So actually what we looked at when we were looking at our managed choice policy, we brought Robin in to look at it for pre-K as well. We started off saying, it would be great to start at pre-K to, if we're, trying to really move back into the neighborhood model to at least move back into the zone model first and then move, because we couldn't do everything in 1 year. So we said to Robin, how would it be if pre-K parents that are registering this year registered within their zone if we encourage that? And so Robin tried it out. She tried it out at our school expo. And so it wasn't a huge recruitment, it was just the very start of it. And then she came to me, she said, it's not gonna work. She said that it's different than, kindergarten. Pre-K parents of pre-K students really want the flexibility because they may have a family member at another part of the city watching, or just a child care, daycare, a babysitter. So they really wanted the flexibility to be able to choose a pre-K across the city. So what we are recommending in our managed choice policy moving forward is that we encourage parents to register their children in pre-Ks within their zone. But if they choose not to, that's fine, just so that they know that, because we also understand that it's parents want the continuity. So they want the students to be able to stay within their zone for K if they chose to go to a pre-K outside of their zone.
And overall, how many CBOs do you forecast will close as a result of this?
So I'm not saying that any would close, I'm not sure, but we will be looking, and we don't have any decisions yet as far as which CBOs. But, because a lot of the CBOs don't just service our students. I mean, some of them the YMCA is a CBO, for example, and they're certainly not going to close. But we have not made any decisions yet as far as which. We're looking at the data, and so there is more information that we have to look at before any of those decisions are made.
And this is actually just in regards to what one of our speakers said. They talked about why not turn School 44 into a citywide option or a citywide choice. And they were talking about the potential costs for renovations. When we're renovating all of these places, we have to do renovations to make them suitable for small children, right? Do those projects count as capital improvement projects, which is my understanding those are reimbursable up to 98% by the state? Who's paying for that?
So actually, Mike Schmidt, we've been working with Mike Schmidt and in looking at the renovations that are needed. It's not going to be extensive. Especially School 57 is already serving pre-K through 2, so it's already serving young students. We would be making the renovations, and hopefully we would be using CIP to do that, but it would not be significant. It might be lowering basically lowering the toilets, things like that. So it's not, we have looked at the regulations, and as far as meeting the regulations of what's required for these pre-K centers. And then as far as outfitting the classrooms, that is going to be the furniture that's needed. That would be supported by the EPK grant.
Well, another concern, just from what Commissioner LeBron said, she worked in School 44. And she felt that you said something about it not being up to par.
I got the follow-ups.
Yeah, so what I'm wondering then is this building suitable to be even renovated, right? Like it sounds like there might be some other issues with it that that's a concern for me. You know, I've never worked in that building.
I can turn that over to Mike. He's on his way out.
The question with regards to 44 School and its appropriateness, it's certainly a building that has needed capital work, and it's certainly a building that has needed capital work, and we actually had some scheduled for this spring. That work will have to be, if we go with the plan, that work will have to come back in some of the out years to kind of get many of the items in the pre-K classroom would need bathrooms in the classroom and so on and so forth. We would do those sort of capital improvement projects because the renovation of those spaces in terms of putting bathrooms in the classroom are very expensive. For this coming summer, we would do what I would refer to as make-ready work, and we'd identify the classrooms from Dr. Hooper, and wherever those classrooms that we identify for this fall, we'll have to go in and do what is necessary for us to open up on September 1st. So I wouldn't be able to give you an exact list until we actually walk through and do that. But we've actually, from a facility standpoint, we walked both buildings, and we have just some broader ideas in regards to, some paint and so on and so forth. We'll have to do that. But there may be some other items that we need to put in that. So once we, now we have a facilities lens at it, we'll add that pre-K piece, and that'll be the final piece of the puzzle. But this summer's work will all be done for maintenance. It's not reimbursable. In the out years, year 2 and year 3, if we have an approved capital project at both buildings, then that would be reimbursable. So we would postpone the bathrooms and some of those real infrastructure needs until the year 2 or year 3. And that is reimbursed back.
Are you on?
I have some other minutes follow-up for Mike.
Yeah, can I follow up, Mike? Come on back, please. Thank you. So I do want to follow up because, one, Mike, you just said, I know that, and Marie, you said we hope it's a CIP project. Again, that is not guaranteed that it will be approved as a capital improvement project. And I know 44 has been on the schedule, off the schedule for improvements. It's been an ongoing complaint for a number of years from staff and parents about the condition of that building. It's not unknown to this community, to this board, that the condition of that building is almost deplorable. But you said make ready, and I will testify that Hart Street was made ready for the bilingual academy, and I think that you and your team tried to do the very best that you could, given the budget, the circumstances, how quickly the turnaround was. But when we're talking about creating an entire center, not just a temporary space to house individuals, these are the things that should be more thoroughly talked about and really understood. Because when you say that, what I imagine is that when I walked into the Bilingual Academy right after summer ended, on the first day that the bathrooms weren't even completed. There was a section of the bathrooms completed, but there was another side that you couldn't even use because we had completed the work there. And so what it sounds like is that we're gonna hatch meal some of these areas in that building to make it suitable for a certain number of students, and then maybe, hopefully, get capital improvement money to do it, but it would be coming out of general funds. And I cannot stress again that this entire plan is not going to be a cost savings to the district. And I hear that it was never presented. And I will say Superintendent Terry Dates told me the same thing. And I'm like, well, we have a $55 to $60 million deficit to close by the end of this budget cycle. So for me, I don't want to be taking on new projects, but I do also want to just say there is going to be a cost for furniture and equipment that 44 does not have for the UPK classrooms. It does have some UPK classrooms, but not enough, certainly. And that's going to be a cost too. And I don't know where that cost would be coming from. And again, if we're talking about that cost is coming out of general funds that has a negative balance right now, again, and I'm speaking to the board at this point, I want the board to understand that this has some real consequences financially for us to be making this decision. And finally, I just have to touch base on this because it was a follow-up to one of your questions, Commissioner Malloy. Well, how many CBOs will close? There are going to be a significant number of CBOs that will close and that will be impacted. And for us to pretend that they have not reached out and shared that information, both on the administrative side and the board, I will not allow that lie to go through on record. CBOs have said they're going to financially take a significant hit. And whether they offer other services, wraparound services and programs, including the Y downtown. I had a real serious conversation with the Y downtown, which is where my daughter went to UPK. They will not be able to financially sustain their center. And it was not just our small CBOs. We're talking about our CBOs that have, because of a 20-year relationship, have become dependent on this income in their budget. So we're not going to lie and say that CBOs, we don't know who's going to be impacted. A significant number of them will close because they have been operating with this as part of the operating budget. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just one final question, well, actually two. So who's paying for the enrichment program until 6 p.m.? Sorry, but I mean, had that been an option for our family, full day pre-K, that would have been super awesome. Would have saved a lot on childcare. However, how can you even afford that? Until 6 p.m. Who's paying for that?
So the enrichment program, we made use of our Title IV grants. So we've already submitted proposals for state ed to review. It does meet the requirements of title funding, and so that is what would be funding the enrichment program. And in regards to the furniture for these classrooms, that would be the UPK and UPK grants. That would not be under.
Look into that, Commissioner. We have looked at the regulations on what we can use school buildings for, and we have to check on that with council and see if we can actually open it up to have school building, or the school buildings available for outside agencies that would make money off of it during that time period. So, Carl, I'd ask if you could look into it. That would be great.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, I got one more follows. I have a few more follows, but the grant funding, saying that the furniture and the equipment is going to be available through grant funding, did we secure grant funding for furniture and for 2 centers? Because I can't imagine, having worked in CBOs for the last 18 years in grants of various organizations, when you write a grant, you have to be very specific about what the need is, how you're going to utilize the funding, and in that time frame. This is a brand new plan that has come before the board, again, in 5 weeks. Your grants have already been approved. So you're going to saying that you're going to write additional grants to seek funding, or is the grants, the money that's available now, how would have had the foresight to understand that we would need to purchase an additional amount of furniture and equipment for 2 new buildings? I just need to understand, like, it doesn't make sense to me, so I need you guys to make it make sense. And while you guys are there talking about money, again, I want to go back to that slide that talked about the 2.224 million. Again, if that's in-kind donations or if that's funded by the grants, and how are we providing that to the CBOs?
Well, I can start with the 2.24 million. That is out of the pre-K grant. CBOs get paid $9,000 per child per contract. That's how the district does it in the contract. And then above that contracted amount, these, goods and services are provided, like the curriculum. We order the curriculum for every classroom, whether it's in a CBO or a school, because we all use the same high school curriculum. And that is something that they expect us to pay for with the grant, because that's what the program is really about, is that education.
There's no savings. I guess this is my question then. That 2.24 million that's being thrown out there, that's not a real savings to the district. We have to provide these things whether they're in or out of this grant.
Yes, we will still provide these things for all the children, no matter where they might be.
Wherever they're at. We
Because
still have this call.
that is our mission with the pre-K program, to educate children. So we have to provide things like the music program and
Right, the
different,
staff attendance and the training and the recruitment.
So they're not savings, but they are, I guess, resources that are provided to children in the CBOs.
So we still have to provide the resources in-house or out-house?
Yes.
I don't know why that number was then put out there as, I'm just confused to why that would even be put out there, but.
I think the reason the number was put out there was because there was the talk about that it would cost, it would cost more if you added up, 9,000 per student times the number of students, then, it seemed as though, the questions that we were getting was that it would cost us more to serve our students. And we said, well, there's actually more costs that go into it that we are providing to CBOs as well as to our students. So it really is not, we didn't introduce this as a savings, but it doesn't cost more to service our kids, it's equal.
Well, it is going to be a higher cost, because back to what Commissioner Malloy was saying, when CBOs hire the certified teachers, we're paying 33% of the benefits and pension. That's not, well, not 33% of the pension, but 33% of the fringe benefits. That's not something that CBOs historically will pay at that rate and that amount. So it is a higher cost for us. It's a higher cost for us to employ certain individuals working in UPK. We also would have to eat the cost of the fingerprints. I don't even know who's eating the cost of the fingerprints. But again, I would have 1,000,001 questions, and I can stay here asking questions all night. But this is why, again, we should not be rushing a decision in 5 weeks. Because there are so many unanswered questions, and we could go through the board log, but it's not going to be enough time to answer all of these questions. But to present this number to say, hey, it's going to be an equal cost, is not going to be an equal cost. And this is something that has to be provided no matter what, whether they're in-house or out-house. I don't even know why that was put in there.
So I guess I'm going to channel Terry, Superintendent Dade again, when I say that, we have to look at the cost of the declining enrollment. And so if we don't move forward with this plan and we close those 2 schools, we will have 2 empty buildings that will be taken up by charter schools next year or the following year. If we continue that trend, then we will have a loss of, we will be under 19,000 students in 8 years. So I think that when we're looking at cost, we have to look at the continued stability of our district. And if we are going to continue to have a district to serve our students, we have to look at innovative ideas to maintain our student population. This is one of them.
Yeah, so I would just add, and I'm sorry, can I just add this piece? Because I wholeheartedly understand Superintendent Dade's argument around that. And this is a trend that's been going on for a number of years, so I do applaud the fact that we are looking at a way to potentially increase enrollment. But for me, to say that, to throw out a statistic that nobody's ever heard, I've never read it anywhere, to say, oh, they're out at a CBO, they're more likely to go to a charter, or that was the statistic that's being thrown out there. I have no idea where that statistic came from. I would need to see for myself the report, the evidence, the research behind it, who conducted the research, was there by. I need those answers for me, and I think this board should already be used to me asking 1,000,001 questions, because that's how far down deep into these rabbit holes I want to undergo into before I make a decision. And what I also want to say is that, and again, you're asking for 5 weeks to make a determination. There is no deadline from the state that I could find that said this board had to make a determination by March 1st on whether we were going to open a UPK Center. And what I told Superintendent Dade, and I said this Tuesday, and I'm going to repeat it again this Tuesday, and I'm going to keep repeating it, is that I am open to having these conversations, but I'm not open to being rushed into decisions without having all the facts and figures in front of me and a really comprehensive understanding of why we're being asked to do this. This is just not enough for me. But that's not to say that we don't take a few more weeks. What I've asked Terry to do is separate the UPK from the February 27th resolutions and decisions and allow it to go through the budget process and to have more ample conversations around this. And I do think, it just frustrates me because I understand the situation that we're in, and financially I'm always arguing about the money. I want this district to make better financial choices, and I'm going to always stand behind that. And I know that we have some very difficult decisions to make this year, but while we're making difficult decisions, the idea of them spending money for this because of I'm not buying it at this point, so I just need more time to understand it. And again, I will implore my colleagues to consider that request.
If I could just respond to just two of those points, just to clarify for you. So the data that you're referring to, the statistics, that actually came from Dr. Hooper. She's been tracking this information for many years. And so it is actually the data that she has been collecting. So we can definitely show you that. So it wasn't just a statistic from out there, that was our data. Those were our students that we have been tracking. The second point as to the date. So March 1st, that is a looming date for us, and it's state ed. It's if you change any grade level configuration changes, if you open up a new school or close a school, it has to be board approved by March 1st. Now these pre-K centers are actually programs, and they are programs that are going to be connected to a school that does not, one of our schools that does not have pre-K. So the Pre-K Center, the Reese's program is connected to School 58. So that is considered a grade level reconfiguration, and so that does require a decision of board approval by March 1st in order, so that's why.
But wouldn't that decision be a school reconfiguration for an existing school, not a school that's closing?
Well, there's the, so
You just said Reese's
we're
connected to
closing,
58.
but we're closing schools 44 and 57. Well, we're proposing schools 44 and 57, and then these two new centers would be connected to one of our existing schools. So it would be a grade level reconfiguration for that existing school, if that makes sense.
Why, I was going to say, well, why wouldn't you just submit it as a reconfiguration for those schools separate from this board deciding that those two schools become centers?
Well, because we have to use those buildings. We're going to be using those buildings to house the students.
Right, but you're not giving them a bedfold. You're saying that you're reconfiguring an existing school. So why couldn't we tell the state that we're going to reconfigure two schools that are already open? We're not even discussing any closing. We're reconfiguring these two schools. And then if for whatever reason it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen. But again, why does the March 1st decision have to be tied if those schools and those bedfolds are not attached to the two schools that are potentially closing?
So it would be a reconfiguration of two existing schools to add pre-K. And if we're not going to do it, we can't say that we are and submit that to state ed. So we can only submit that to state ed if the board approves the pre-K. So it is tied. It's not tied to school 57 and 44. It's tied, so they're separate, but it is requirement. We would not be able to move forward this year.
And then, is there no way to request the state for a waiver, an extension of time on that request? Carl, I'm looking at you. Is there a way to request to the state an extension or a waiver on the decision for the UPK centers?
Offhand, I can't say that with certainty, but in my memory, I have never heard stated waiting that March 1st deadline with respect to reconfiguration.
No, but I would like the board to consider reaching out to the state and having a conversation with them.
I have more questions. Are there programs that are currently half-day programs that are going to be moving to a full-day model anywhere in the city? And how many schools are going to be affected by this?
We only have one school left that has a half-day program, and that's School 52. And
School 23 is not?
no, they're now full day this year. And what I have to do is every year I track the enrollment at Beds Day. That's the day that the state uses to give us our funding based on enrollment. So I've been watching that enrollment, and this year, with 2 half-day sessions, you have a total of 36 seats, 18 in each session. This year at Beds Day, we only had 18 students enrolled at School 52. So we only filled half the seats. Most of them were in the AM with just a few kids in the PM. So when we get to that point, that's the tipping point. We're only filling half the program now. We have to either move it to a full day, or the option was leave just one half day there. And we are looking to move it to a full day because that's where the demand is. Our parents vote with their feet, we always say, by where they choose to enroll their student. And right now, we're not seeing parents choosing to enroll in half-day programs. And as we've seen that demand decline, that's when we've switched them to a full day. Now, we do have integrated classes at School 57 and at School 33, one each, that are half-day sessions, 2 sessions, each day at those locations, where we have 8 children with special needs and 10 typically developing children for a total of 18. And we have maintained those because we really need to keep those seats for our children with special needs, and that gives us more seats. We may look to change that in the future, I don't know, we keep tracking it. So we have a few places where there are half-day seats still after 52 goes to full day next year.
And forgive my ignorance here, but if you have 18 kids in your capacity, which is 18, how the heck do you fit 18 mats for nap time?
Well, you did very artfully in the way we design our rooms, but the state has a requirement of square footage per child. And we go with a little more than that, like 35 square feet per child. So I looked at the blueprint for School 52 and the square footage of that classroom, and I figured out, based on the math, that it would fit 18 children. It actually could have fit 19, but we can't go to 19. So, and then we send our coaches in to look at the room. Do they need to reconfigure it so we can fit the mats in? There are things with classroom design that we can do that will help them be able to get the mats in that classroom.
I'm familiar with 52. One of my children, 2 of my children did pre-K there. Is there any room to expand? I don't think there's a lot of room there.
I don't think I do not, to my knowledge, know of an empty classroom at 52. That's a heavily subscribed school. A lot of parents choose 52.
And they're drawing a lot of kids from the surrounding neighborhood. Is it possible to run a half-day program in conjunction with a full-day program? So like you have...
If you had the seats, I'd have to get those full-day seats from somewhere. What I can't do is leave 18 half-day seats unfilled and know that they're not going to get filled. And it's a waste of those seats when I could be serving children that maybe need a full-day program and are waiting for that program. I can't justify that. I watched those numbers drop each year, and when we got to 18, that was my time when I knew I had to make a change, because I can't allow a resource to be unused like that when it's needed for the community.
Could someone just maybe elaborate on how our special education students are impacted by these changes?
Well, we have one agency that does provide special education services that we currently contract with for Gen Ed. For about 10 years, I supervised the preschool special ed, so I do have a lot of knowledge about that. In July, that moved into our school age special ed department, so it's all in the Department of Specialized Services now. But the one agency that we contract with for Gen Ed has integrated classrooms there that our students with special needs do use. And so, we need to preserve that because we need those special seats for special needs students. But that is the only agency that we currently contract with, the one that offers this kind of programming. Related services and special education itinerant teacher services are provided at any of our locations. I'm just talking about special class programs like integrated classrooms or special classes. And we do have those programs in district. They have faded from the agency scene over the years because the reimbursements are so low. A large agency that did provide those seats had to close a few years ago.
So there won't be integrated classrooms in any of the new centers?
That could be a possibility if the need was there. It'd be a coordination with our Department of Specialized Services.
But we would have room for that?
We could always do that. Actually, in our center right now, we have special classes that serve mostly a lot of students with autism. And at 57, we have a preschool special class that just opened this year, and an integrated classroom that are already existing there. And they would not need to move if it were a Pre-K center. We have special classes in Reese ECR Pre-K Center now.
Thank you.
All right, my turn. Go back to slide 9. Yeah, real quick. All right. So we got Buffalo with CBOs of 19%, Syracuse 30%, Rochester 61%. Could that be the reason why we are nationally recognized?
It can be one of the reasons. I think it's
Could
the
that be
work
our
that we
people
do.
are one of the,
You know?
one of the ones that are nationally recognized. And so I would share that for the district's consideration. 61% of the UPK and EPK are in CBOs, and we have a nationally recognized program. What will happen if many of those pre-K and UPK students go back into the district? I'm not sure that we will continue to have a nationally recognized program for many reasons. And let me just start off by saying, you know, the superintendent and the district has made the argument that we need to save buildings. Well, first of all, if we were providing a quality education to our students, we would have these buildings. We are providing quality education to the students in this district, so that's why parents walk away from this district.
Thank you.
For us to want to, for the only argument to be that we want to have these buildings, that's not a good argument for me. Why have we gotten to these nationally recognized programs? I believe is because we have this kind of partnership, because we have people in our communities who love and care for our children. When we see staff that come here, when we see teachers come here and talk about the fact that, you know, they love our children, it's not demonstrated in the academic results, right? And this board is the one that's pushed us to get from a 39% back in 2006 to where we are somewhere around close to 60% now. Not the people in this district, because they have not supported our children and they have not supported our families. In fact, they have disrespected our families on many occasions. And so why would we not want our children to remain in these CBOs where they're being loved and cared for? And I've heard from a few of the providers, the fact is that you've got teachers who don't want to change our babies' diapers. And so if they don't want to do that, why would we put them out of school? We are seeing a decline in enrollment because of the low birth rates, but people don't feel that they're getting a quality education. And so and then, like the first, I believe it was the first speaker who talked about her child being a genius, 3-year-old, her grandchild. Somebody back there snickered. Really? We can't have a black child who is a genius at 3 years old? And what ends up happening is that when they're at genius level, by the time they get in 3rd and 4th grade, they need special education. Why would we want to put them in this school district? Now, we're here fighting to try to make sure that the district is educating our kids. But I would argue to you that our CBOs care and love for our children more than the district cares and loves for our children. So let me just say that I'm not really in support of the argument that the superintendent is making, because what's going to end up happening, you quoted the number of maybe 19,000. Well, one of the things I've been saying since I've been here is that at some point, because of technology, we're not going to need as much brick and mortar anyway. People are going to be learning online. And if they don't, and if they're not getting the quality education they need, how many AP courses do our kids get? Our high school students? Very few. So why would they choose and why would we want? And let me tell you, I'm on this board, but I support my community first, right? And so the reason that they're making a different decision is because we're not providing them with quality education, not making them career college ready. And so to have that argument that we need to keep schools, I think that's a weak argument. I don't know, I don't really understand the savings. And I think you mentioned, Anna Marie, about Terry School District. And I think his demographics are different. Am I correct about that? He only has like a 20% Black and Hispanic, let me just say African American population. This is majority.
So I don't have the specific percentages, but what Terry has always said is if where he supported, the schools that he supported, it was the highest diversity of the entire district, and
I
that
didn't
is.
say diversity, I said black. All right, I didn't say diversity, I said black. All right, so I would argue that, and what I would also, because I'm not going to support this, and I would ask and recommend that you come back with an alternative, because this would be an undue burden on our families and our children that are within these CBOs. And it seems to me that because they're in CBOs, to me, that I would argue that that's what makes this program a nationally recognized program. And I would think that it would not be if it was the other way around. And so I will not support this. I think you all need to come back with something else. My vote would be no. I've talked to my colleagues. I'm not sure what they're voting. And the other thing, as to Commissioner Vaughn's argument, is it's too soon. It's too simple. You're coming to us and it's almost an insult that you're coming to us almost at the last minute wanting us to vote for this. And I just don't, I just have a different perspective on this and the impact that this would have on our community-based organizations and ultimately in our community. And so I just think the rationale is a weak one. Just to keep school buildings is not a good rationale. Even compare that to the relationship that our families have with those community-based organizations. That's not something that I support, that rationale. I support the rationale in terms of relationships, in terms of them being able to build the educational foundation of our children. And yet, when they get into the school district, we end up failing. They end up being suspended. The parents are not well received in this district. They end up in special education. And we know that they come here as being achievers. And so I wish the superintendent was here because I could tell him myself about this. I would recommend that the district comes back with an alternative and not the UPK program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Malloy?
How does this fit in with our need to close 60?
Why we need to find any way we can to bridge that gap. And you heard us say that there's $4.1 million in savings by closing the buildings. Reopening them as pre-K is cost neutral or almost cost neutral for us. So we would net $4.1 by closing the buildings, and it's really not an option for us. So Mr. Franklin is behind you. He and his staff are working with all of cabinet to try and find every way we can to bridge that gap. It's significant, as you can imagine. $60 million is a lot of money.
Yeah, so Terry was in Albany today to ask for the additional funds.
He was actually doing two things. He was testifying. It's a Senate opportunity to hear the representatives of their finance committee that listen to all of the education partners testify about what needs are based upon the executive proposal. The executive proposal did not net us a lot of new money for next year. Under $12 million of new money, which is a roll-up of all the aid categories, foundation aid plus the special services aids, which were broken out separately before. So it's a really big hit for us when they're all wrapped together like that. So he was obviously lobbying to get $35 million for this school year to close out the gap that we have.
That's spin-up aid?
Yes, and that we need before June 30th. And then he was also asking for additional funding above the executive proposal for next year. If we don't get any more than what the governor's proposed, our projected gap is $60 million for next year.
And the $35 million spin-up aid, that's a loan?
Correct, we pay back.
And we would need an additional, probably ask of $35 million for next year as well, or we just don't know yet?
We're probably not going to get that. We're hoping to get something more than less than $12 million. We're hoping to get more. We will not be getting 60. I don't believe anybody thinks we'll even get close to that, but anything will help.
So you're saying that this is not an option? So what do you explain what you mean by that?
We don't have an option but to look at any way we can to close $60 million in a gap. And
Okay, so you're not saying that it is not an option for us?
No,
Okay.
no, Commissioner. We're just looking for ways that we can save money and not harm children and do the best we can for the district looking forward. And to your point on academic improvement, we are all working really diligently on plans to.
I don't need that argument. The fact of the matter is now that this works for us. What the district has to do is develop the kind of academic experience that would draw students in. That's what we got, and that's what we have failed to do in this district for years. And and I understand the mayor's point. I understand the state's point. I understand we have not done our due diligence when it comes to educating our kids. And a program that is working, we want to try to bring them into a district where they're already failing. So I personally have concerns about it and won't support it. I'll just put that on the table. So Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I just want to add and emphasize, because I don't want any confusion on this piece for myself or for anybody here. I understand we do have to close schools, and so that to me does represent a savings in trying to close the 60 million gap. I did tell Terry, and I've said this, I will support that, and I think we have more difficult decisions to make. At this time, I cannot support the UPK proposals for the building as it stands. I don't think we have enough information or enough time, like I said earlier, 5 weeks to mull over a decision and a process and a collaboration that has taken 20 years to build. It's almost insulting to this community. So I can't, in good conscience and faith, have that support behind that. However, what I think you were trying to say was the school closing piece. Like that's a tough. We really don't have an option on the school closing piece, primarily because we do have to find ways to save money and close that gap. And that I will support. The same thing with the merger with Franklin and supporting those two schools and merging into one and providing them with the proper resources. I think it's a nightmare currently right now, personally. However, that I think is a very smart strategic plan for that school to lower our costs, but to provide them with the proper supports and services. I'm not supporting the Monroe plan right now. I've talked to Terry about that. He can have further conversations with you guys about that as it stands currently. But I do think that there are potentially other options for those buildings. And we have discussed this. We have rented places we're renting. We can look at the end of the life of those cycles, but there are other opportunities. So I do hope that you do consider coming back with some options, because it could be potentially a do or die. I don't know where the rest of my colleagues are at on their vote, but I know Commissioner Elliott and I right now are strong no's on the UPK piece, but I will be supporting yes on the school closing. So
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Powell?
Thank you so much. I've been listening carefully to both the administration's presentation and the concerns of my colleagues. And a couple of thoughts come to mind, so let me start with my questions. The school 57, the reconfiguration you're describing, already have a pre-K program there. You're really talking about eliminating the grades K through 2 and expanding the pre-K seats. Has there been some consideration to phasing in your Pre-K Center idea so that the board can potentially wholeheartedly embrace the ask for School 57, and separate from the conversation about School 44? I'll listen for my answer and then I have a follow-up.
So phasing in would mean that we don't close School 57. So the savings that we identified at $4.1 million would be reduced in half. Phasing in would not be closing the school.
I think you misunderstood my question. Let me go on to the School 44 part and then circle back, okay? If we close School 44, if that's what the resolution was, is to close School 44, would we have any time whatsoever to consider what to do with the building in order to support, in order to keep it in our portfolio for educational purposes? Can it lie empty even for 1 year as we think about these things?
So we don't own our buildings, the city of Rochester does, so if it's vacant, I imagine a charter school would come in or something else. So it is not our building unless we are serving students. And we couldn't use the building to move staff to the building to save one of the potential leases that we have. Because again, we don't get reimbursed for that, and again, these are not our buildings.
Well, I'm not sure your logic is perfect here, because when we disengage with the school, we still have a separate transaction, a separate resolution to turn over the building back to the city for whatever purposes the city deems necessary for it. So again, I ask, is there a possibility of agreeing to close School 44 but retain the building, not move forward with a resolution to turn the building over to the city right away? I guess that might be a legal question for Carl.
What would be the purpose with that, Commissioner Powell?
I'm only asking because of the distress that some board members are feeling about how little time we have to make a decision. I'm also, and I thank you for asking, Commissioner Elliott, I really do, because I'm having trouble making myself understood with the School 57 piece. What I'm suggesting is that if the UPK centers, if we focus on opening 44, whether to mothball it, give it back to the city, or turn it into a center the following year.
Well, for
Does
me,
that make sense?
yeah, for me,
I'm really asking the administration to give us an idea of whether that something like that has even been considered.
yeah, and I know you have a question for Carl. Let me just say, for me, that's not an option at all. So you had asked, you wanted some advice from Carl, Commissioner Powell?
Right, about
Okay.
how much time do we have between when we say we're closing a school and when we have to turn it over to the city?
Carl? Yes.
There's not a specific period of time of which I am aware. However, the law governing the use of city buildings for school purposes contemplates that they are in fact being used for school purposes. I would not ever suggest us doing something like that being requested without a specific agreement with the city to that effect.
No, I'm going to let her do that. Commissioner Powell, do you want the administration to respond further?
Well, I only presented that, as I said, because I'm hearing the anxiety over the short decision-making process. And I wonder if Commissioner LeBlanc and Commissioner Malloy would react to that sort of hybrid solution. Would that allay any of your concerns, Commissioner LeBlanc and Commissioner Malloy?
No, with all due respect, thank you for bringing that up, but I completely disagree. I can't even imagine how a parent would feel to have their school closed and then that building sit vacant for a year and their kids are displaced having to go somewhere else. It's like a slap in the face to the community. So I'm sorry, I wouldn't support any type of plan like that. And it's a waste of district space, and I wouldn't want to lose that building to a charter school.
Commissioner Powell, you have any other questions, reactions, comments?
I'm still listening for Commissioner LeBlanc's response.
Okay, she stepped out. So when she comes back, I'll let her, she wasn't in to hear it, so you may have to repeat it when she comes back in. But in the meantime, let me go to the president to see, let me see if the president has any questions or comments about the conversation. President Warren?
Yeah, I would just note, very brief my comments, that just wanted to correct this notion that I agree with you, Vice President Elliott, that parents, as a general rule, have not trusted this district with the education of their children. I think that is a generalized statement that pretty much applies K through 12. And that's why we've tried over the years to improve the outcome so that people feel a little bit more confident. But that's never been the case with respect to the Pre-K program. That program, whether it's run by CBOs or the district at its center, has been heralded as a success. So I don't think we should take that generalization about the district, which I agree with you is true, and say, therefore, parents, they're choosing to vote with their feet and they're going to the CBOs. I think they go to the CBOs because that's how the system was set up. We developed a wonderful system where we have people cooperating and working together. But I'm not averse to the notion that the district might want to try to compete and provide the same quality. These are not ad services that they have at the existing center. No one has ever said that. As Robin has indicated, the performance indicators suggest that those kids do very well at those centers. So I don't want people to think, oh, we're just going to throw these kids at a district center that doesn't have a tried and tested pre-K program. We do, and it works very well. And I tell you, I think we should be standing up for the district saying, we're going to, one of my big frustrations about this district, and Vice President Elliott, you've heard me say this, we have a terrible track record about replicating best practices. Just don't do it. So instead what happens is somebody else enters into the gaping hole of us not replicating best practices. A perfect example is soda. Soda has been widely respected. You all know what happened. We developed a model for that. Just like Kodak developed the digital camera. We put it on the shelf. Nobody paid any attention to it. And the next thing you know, the Asian market had taken over the digital camera. Same thing with soda. What ended up happening? You all know this. A charter school ended up opening a performing arts school. This is just simply about replicating our best practice. Everybody sits here and says, oh yeah, the pre-K program is really good. Nobody can argue that. And when I'm talking about the pre-K program, I'm talking about the district. No one can say it's a piss poor program. No one can say that. And all this argument is, and again, I don't want to argue with anybody tonight. I listen to people. I just ask you to listen to me and then maybe we move on. But no one can argue the fact that we have a quality program. And there's nothing wrong with expanding that. Why do we as a district have an aversion to replicating our best practices? There's a market out there that is extremely competitive. And all Kerry is saying is, we have a product that is successful, just like CBOs do, but we ought to expand it. Philosophically, I got no issues with that. I don't. I think that's the kind of forward thinking we're going to need. People think it's all about number of X's and O's, ones and twos, and adding up columns. It's also about the number of students that we got coming into this district, and we don't have them coming into the district. And the data is given to us that children that are in the district center tend to stay in district programs, in district schools. That's also, facts that constitute support. These are stubborn things, no matter what the dictates of our past, our own agendas. Facts should be the deal breaker. And the facts here are, we have, not talking about the CBOs, they got good stuff going on there, all of them. No one's saying they're not doing a good thing. But the fact is, we too have a good pre-K program, and there's nothing wrong with replicating that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Superintendent just walked in, and so he's missed most of the conversation. Commissioner Powell, when Commissioner LeBron returns, I will go back to you so that you can ask that question and have Commissioner LeBron to respond to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And let me just say, let me just sort of summarize some conversation for the superintendent. And you need to hear it from me. I'm not supporting your plan. I look at the numbers. When you look at Rochester, when it's 39% RCSD and 60% CBO, could we be a nationally recognized program because of that breakout? And so I can't support this. And what I've asked and what I've said to the deputy superintendent and the chief of staff, that at least for me, there needs, and you may have the votes. Let me just say that. But for me, you need to go back and look for an alternative CBOs bring to this to make the district look good. It's not that the district is making the CBOs look good. The CBOs are making the district look good. Thank you. I'm not as convinced that when we get our children into these into the hands of many of the staff in this district, that they're going to treat them the same way. So so that's been my position on that. Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Powell wanted you to react to something. So, Commissioner Powell, can you respond? She's back in the room now. Could you present what you would want her to respond to, please? Commissioner Powell?
Sorry, I was on mute. And perhaps the superintendent can react to it as well. We did hear what staff had to say, but I'd like to hear what the superintendent has to say. So Commissioner LeBron, what I had asked was, what if we moved forward on a kind of a hybrid? And it would sound something like, and the reason I asked is simply to address the concerns that you and Commissioner Malloy and Commissioner Elliott have articulated. And it clearly didn't settle well with Commissioner Elliott, but my thought was, School 57 is already a pre-K through 2. The change is not so radical there when it with the conversion of School 57 to a Pre-K Center, per the superintendent's recommendation. But what if we also committed to closing School 44 without making the commitment to a third Pre-K Center in that building until we got more information in response to some of your concerns about the pressure to make a quick decision with little information.
So I would just say that, again, I do support the superintendent on the closing of 57 and 44 as a way to have some savings and go more closer to closing the gap that we have to close in 1920. I think that proposal will still leave the same lingering questions for me of needing more time to just understand all of the dynamics. I think for me, my experience in this district, both as a parent and as a board member, is the lack of foresight when we make decisions and the implications that it's had. And so I just feel like in a 5-week time span, again, Superintendent Dave, you were not here, but I said in a 5-week time span to break down a 20-year collaboration in a different way, although I do understand the points and the vision that you may have for this and some of your reasonings why. I just don't think 5 weeks is enough time. And I don't think that's anything new to you. You and I had this conversation one-on-one. You know, I like to be very upfront. And in fact, from the moment the superintendent presented the whole proposal, I went to his office after the meeting and I was like, I'm with you on this one, I gotta linger over the Monroe one a little bit more. And the UPK, I told him from the beginning, I was like, I don't know about that one. I would need more information, more time, more data. But the fact is that it remains at this point 2 weeks out before that vote has to come to the board, and we still don't know which CBOs are gonna be impacted. And then even when the FAQ was not enough for me. And I'm willing to come in as an individual person and spend some more time and drilling you guys about these questions one-on-one. I'm fine with that too, but I just don't think that there's enough time and for me, for the UPK piece of it. So that's where I'm at. And so that would still present the same proposal, Willa, even one versus the other. And I've never understood why the district had a K-2 school, although Commissioner Malloy mentioned something that I actually hadn't thought about, is the children being close in age. But even with that, right before I got on the board, my issue with the school district was the fact that my child was placed into a school that was slated to close, and we just left a different UPK center. So now here I have my youngest child going into 3 different locations and buildings and staff in 3 years of her first life, and having to adapt to not only myself as a parent, with privileges of driving at that point, because I can't say the same for the first 2, but certainly with Sophia I had the opportunity to drive, but the implications of that and based on the decisions that this district had made. So again, I just need more information, and I need to really understand the real consequences, not only to this district, but to the families that they're serving, that the CBOs are serving, the economical impact to the city of Rochester, and a number of other things. So no, I appreciate though, Commissioner Powell, and I'll say this, that you offered an alternative or some type of a different solution to this dilemma for me, but again, I would need more time.
And let me just say, we've had some great conversation around this, but I'll just, lastly, if the...
Oh, I'm sorry, Cynthia, could we hear Superintendent Dade's response to that proposal?
Vice President was getting to.
Yeah, that's our
Oh, I'm sorry,
No
I'm
problem,
sorry.
no problem. So we
I
can
thought you
just...
were closing the meeting.
Well, about to, but I wanted to assist the superintendent. No, I'm talking about closing this item. No, I wasn't, yeah, she said meeting, right? Yeah, no, not the meeting, but what we're discussing. So, Superintendent David, if you'd like to respond, I know you heard limited conversation.
Thank you all for allowing me to breeze in right from Albany. So a few points. One, I want to be able to provide every single commissioner and the community with the data that they need to make an informed decision. My strong point of view is that we do not need another 6 weeks to provide that data. My team has any data that you're going to be requesting at pretty quick turnaround. The question with regards to quality of CBO versus quality of district, we have that data. There's a lot of what ifs if we turn over our students to our RCSD pre-K. We have the data from our existing Pre-K Center, which is knocking it out of the park. They're bursting at the seams. They're knocking it out of the park on every single metric that you can think of. So we have proof positive that a Pre-K Center can function and thrive in the district. We also have data from CBOs that show that a lot of them are knocking it out of the park. So I don't want this to be a CBO versus district conversation. What it needs to be is we have to address and come up with innovative solutions for reversing the negative trend in enrollment while also garnering savings for the district. I've been very clear that we are out of ratio with our counterparts, which are really pushing more and more for majority of pre-K students being serviced by the education institution, which is the RCSD. There's no data point that anyone can really show me that says that our success is because of the 61-39 ratio. We can pull data points and put that on the table to compare, but our success is not because of a over-reliance on CBOs. What CBOs did for us that I want to absolutely lift up and celebrate is they stepped in where we could not fill pre-K seats. We did not have enough pre-K seats in Rochester City School District, so our community-based organizations did right by our community. They accepted the funding from the RCSD to fill seats and serve the needs of our families. Under my leadership, we're not going to have that be a problem any longer in this school district. We're not going to have that be the concern that we don't have enough seats. So, and now's the time to start making that shift. I truly believe that we would not be serving all the district and the community well if we don't move forward in some manner on this proposal, because I truly believe that this is one of the two strategies that we need to move forward to be like DCPS. District of Columbia Public Schools, one of the only urban school districts in the entire nation that has seen an increase in enrollment for 10 years straight. They did it with two strategies, a pre-K strategy and a diversification of portfolio of schools. Looking at all of our schools and going to parents and saying, what are we missing that we need to provide in our school system to make sure that we have your trust in our educational environment. It's those two strategies together that really allow the District of Columbia, which is 50-50 almost, charter DC public. So this is what I believe strongly that we need to do to move forward. I do believe that we need to be absolutely strategic and open up conversations about what those seats look like. If I had federal funding for everyone, I would just go to bat and be in competitive mode. I firmly believe that if you allowed me to open 2 pre-K centers and we allowed all CBOs to keep their seat availability, that I would recruit and fill those 2 centers because the parents are going to have the trust in what we're going to provide by way of educational outcomes and wraparound care and the like. So again, I hope that we leave this meeting with concrete asks from the commissioners with regards to what data we need at your fingertips to make informed decisions, because we believe that we have the data under Dr. Hooper's leadership to provide you with the data that you need to make those decisions moving forward.
Yeah, let me just, I thought I heard something there. Let me just try to follow through on what I think I heard.
Okay.
So you're saying you're going to recruit new people, new students, and allow the CBOs to retain their...
No, but the same. So our intent period is to recruit new students. I want every single eligible family, every single eligible child to choose the RCSD. So yes, recruitment is what we need to do differently. I believe the charter organizations are doing exceptionally well, and we have not kept pace. I was saying that I truly believe if we were to allow the same number of seats next year, it's not feasible. But there is no question in my mind that we would be able to fill the 2 pre-K centers, because the question that keeps coming up is whether families have confidence in our CSD pre-K, and I truly know that they do. What we've done is we've opened up seats to CBOs that have stepped in and served the communities well, because we have not had the seats. We have to get that ratio back in whack. We have to keep our families' trust from pre-K to K and all the way through to graduation. So that's what I was saying. That.
So you got the federal funding. That's what
to leave it wide open.
Yeah. So let me just say that we'll ask just a couple more questions. It's after 8 o'clock, and we still have another full agenda for CIGR. So Commissioner Malone.
Yeah.
And then if you all have additional questions, you probably should talk to the superintendent.
I guess I didn't know the original history of why we were using CBOs. So like you were saying that you didn't have the availability to provide those services or the seats?
That's right. We did not have seats
Dr.
available.
Hooper, can you speak to that?
We did not have space in our schools for all the seats. Every year I would go to buildings and look around and ask principals and work with our facilities department, patrolling buildings in the summer looking for rooms for pre-K. And, you know, we had a lot of struggles with that. And so we kept increasing our CBO contracts as we got more and more grants. And we would go through a rigorous process and a request for proposal process to select agencies, so we made sure we got the best of the best. But it was really a space issue. That's how it started out.
Were parents asking for those spaces then? There was a demand from parents?
Well, yes, people would come here and register at the district at our central office in the placement.
Or wherever we had it. We've moved it different years, over the years. And then we would have wait lists for locations. So we know what our demand is, because after we fill, then we develop these wait lists, so we know how many people want a program. And that's what we based, that's the data I use to apply for a new grant. If I know I had 100 3-year-olds on a wait list last year and I couldn't place them anywhere, there were no available seats, then when I go to apply to the state, that's the data I would use.
So I'm going to ask that the questions be given to Marisol in a law, because we have another agenda, the CGIR agenda, I think, and we have an executive session. So that's why I really wanted to have a separate meeting, but we couldn't get it together, I guess. And so either, talk to Marisol and Dr. for additional questions that we have. All right? And so we're going to go on to CIGR. Is Dr.
Before Ms. Cooper leaves the table, could I just say over transition, Mrs. Cooper? I want you to hear, while you're here, that because I was in the car and I was mostly just listening, I couldn't say this, I know that the success, I firmly believe that the success of our CBOs is because of the oversight you provide. And so not to be combative, but I do reject what I heard from Commissioner Elliott about the concept that our CBOs are why our universal pre-K is successful. I think the reason pre-K is successful is because of your oversight and ensuring that professional development is there, and ensuring that the evaluations occur, and that both our programs and the CBOs are taking corrective action when issues come up. And I just want to give you your roses.
Thank you very much, and I can only say it's a big collaborative effort.
Vice President Elliott?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yeah, all I was going to say is, Commissioner Powell, you took the words out of my mouth. I didn't want Robin, you to leave without knowing how much we really appreciate that we're in the position that we are in. We talk about the quality of our programs, not only in our CBOs, but also in the district center. So I know you would never say it's all on you, your job, it's not your personality, it's not your leadership style, but it is important that we are in the fortunate position, not only of claiming that our CBOs are effective and positive, but also the district is effective and positive. And you are one of the principal reasons behind it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
So we'll go to the review and acceptance of the 2019 minutes. Oh, right.